We're live. Chase is with us, and we have a special guest with us, Jonathan Tavernari. JT, welcome to the show, man. Thanks for coming on.
Appreciate you guys having me. I love your stuff. I listen to the podcast a lot. And, I do have to say, I'm not a big podcaster, but, there's bits and pieces and there are episodes that I have watched and I have heard. And, but to be honest, I mean, we were talking before this, I just don't have time. And, but when I do, I'm actually able to listen. I like what you guys do. So I appreciate you guys having me. It's an honor.
Ab- Absolutely. 11 p.m. on the East Coast. He's grinding with us tonight. JT, the point of this show, main reason we brought you on is we got to figure out what is wrong with this BYU basketball team. They're 1-3 in conference play. They're on a 3-game losing streak. The offense has not looked great at all. What is going on, and how can we fix this thing?
I did a couple of interviews last week about this, and you know, I'm I'm sounding smarter than I am, although I know a lot of basketball. I've always said that the number one thing that Kevin Young was going to have an issue with was going to be figuring out the rotation, right? And that is because let's be realistic. The main player coming back, Richie is having one heck of a season. The main player coming back was Dallin. We all made a huge deal of Dallin coming back, of having Dallin back, and so Dallin was the main player coming back, right? Um, but then, you know, between Dallin coming back and sometime in August,
Mm-hmm.
something that had never happened before in BYU history happened, and that is a a rated player to be selected as a first round pick, arguably as high as the first pick in the draft for a good amount of time, decided to leave Real Madrid, which is arguably the best place outside of the US for you to have a basketball career, and go to BYU. And at that point, um, between the excitement, between all of it, um, me and a lot of other people said, well, how's the rotation going to work? Because you had a lot of guys. And then you throw in Mahilo and you throw in, Richie, Trevin, Trey, and you throw in Elijah. Well, you throw in all of these guys and you throw in Dawson Baker. And at any normal year at a BYU basketball preseason, Elijah Crawford and Brody Kozlowski, they would be the talk of the town. BYU got four-star recruits. They would be they would be talked about like rock star level,
Mm-hmm.
except the year they came to BYU. The probably the most transcendent situation in college basketball happened because you don't see kids leaving Real Madrid like that. And so, um, as you look at all of that, I feel like there has been a little bit of an expectation that things would work, um, but they haven't. And I truly feel, I don't know if they can play together. I don't know if Dallin and which is the main topic right now, right? I don't know if Dallin and Jaeger can play together. Um, but there has been a lot of they haven't played together on a ton of games, right? It hasn't been like 10 games. And so to me, the main issue, I'll kind of respond to you. What's the problem? How do you fix it? To me, has been Kevin Young's biggest issue this year is how can he adjust the rotation? To me, the only rotation that he has set that makes total sense and that he has gotten figured out is Foos for Keba, Keba for Foos. I feel like the timing of that one, he's gotten down to a science. But on everything else, it just feels like there's one more guy. There's one guy too many. And it is difficult for you to find rhythm. Like I mean, you're talking about my senior year when I gave up my starting spot so that Noah Hardsock could start, so that Tyler could have a little bit more of an impact earlier in the game so I could finish the game. And I was very basketball tired at that point in my life. um we had nine players. I truly believe BYU right now has about 10, 11 players that could break the rotation. If you go down with Dallin, Jaeger, and Elijah, and then you have Richie, Trevin, and Dawson, and then you have Mahilo, and you have Brody, and then you have Keba, and then you have Foose. And we haven't even talked about Trey, and we haven't even talked about Mag. And
Mhm.
so there's just a lot. So I feel like there's one, maybe two guys too many, but it is what it is, and it's the decision that they made. Um, and the last thing I'll say, I know I keep going a lot, but let me say one more thing. Kevin Young, nobody should ever question his X and O's capabilities because you don't get to be the top NBA assistant and pretty much declining NBA offers and benches to be the head coach if you weren't good. But there's a difference between you being the top assistant coach, right? And you being the one that makes the final shot, that calls the final shots, and also the difference between the NBA game and the college game. And so, if somebody can figure this out, it's definitely Kevin Young. Obviously, sometimes it happens later than it should. Sometimes it doesn't happen at all. But I think that there's a lot of things happening. The expectations for BYU were through the roof because of Yegor, because of last year. And so you guys probably gonna ask me a question, and then I'll answer this later about there's two things you should consider this year is winning Big-12, going to the tournament, or becoming a one and done destination for kids like AJ. And I think, can you accomplish both of those goals? I don't know. The jury's still out.
Yeah, it's a good point. It seems like you're almost trading one off for another, right? There's a lot of benefits that come to continuity in a roster and the experience you gain, and then there's benefits that come from landing bona fide superstars like AJ. Let's just talk about it now, JT. You played at BYU and you understand how things might be a little different here in Provo as far as expectations from fans and the investment. Like you talked about, this year is a bit of an anomaly with how much money they've put into the coaching staff and the roster and the talent that they've gathered. So, from your perspective of having played here, been a part of BYU culture, what kind of pressure is Kevin Young, this coaching staff, and this roster feeling right now to succeed this season?
So I don't think that they are. I don't think that they're under pressure because they're going to be fired or let go if things don't work. But I think that like the full disappointment of and I used to feel it, and I didn't make any money playing here, playing at BYU. But like you let people down and they expect and they see you at church and they stop at a grocery store and they're like, God bless you and have a great day. And let's say a quick prayer together and just do some scripture mastery. And I can't believe that we lost. And so that sort of thing. So I feel like the social pressure, and I don't mean social in a bad way, but I mean the social pressure BYU gets to you just because you represent more than yourself. You represent the university, you represent you obviously represent yourself, your family, but the university and a church and a savior. That there is something to be said about having that of representation. And obviously, Kevin is a man of our faith, right? And so I think also from the fact that he was, I mean, he is pretty regarded, right? When you see him give an interview, he talks about Chris Paul, he talks about Kevin Durant, he talks about Devin Booker, he talks about Joel Embiid. I mean, he talks about superstars and he talks about nonchalant, like I talk about Lee Kamard and Chris Miles and Trent Plaston and Jackson Emery. And, those are his guys. And so I think that there's probably a little bit of like crap, I'm supposed to be this guy and I'm not delivering. Obviously, from a financial standpoint, we are in uncharted territory. And these are the things happening that I don't know how this can continually be sustainable whatsoever. I think it's widely known. We all have an idea that Yegor was able to get seven figures for his NIL, and Dallin was a very significant sum as well. Um, but from that perspective, I look at it from a business professional setting because that's what these guys are. The moment you
Mm-hmm.
start getting paid to play basketball, I don't want to hear about these are college kids. Oh, they're amateurs. That ship has sailed.
Whoa,
And
wait, but they have religion homework due, JT.
and that's okay. And that's all right. That's all right too. We all have religious homework. Come follow me. We're supposed to be reading Extra Covenants 2 and 3 this week. Come on now.
That's
And
right.
so all I'm saying is the ship to talk about these kids as collegiate athletes that has sailed. It already has arrived. So we shouldn't even discuss this. So to me, the criticism, you open yourself to criticism when that happens from fans, right? If you're a booster, if you're donating $1,000, $5,000, $10,000, how do you feel? Because you made a financial effort to bring this guy, and talk about between a rock and a hard place. And I this is one of the things I'm not gonna do. I'm not gonna pick sides and say who do you play because it's difficult. On one hand, you have a once in a lifetime recruit that BYU has never gotten before in Yegor Denny. On the other hand, you have arguably the best player BYU had last year in the Big-12 in a gauntlet of a schedule leading them to the NCAA tournament. Well, how do you I mean, and I have a lot of close friends that say you got to make the difficult but right decision. Well, Bob, if Yegor leaves next year, who is your starting point guard? Is Elijah capable? Obviously, he's capable, but he hasn't played. And
Mm-hmm.
here is Dallin Hall, a 2-year, 3-year starter that's about to be that's a junior. And how do you play? How do you play him off the bench? How do him and Yegor are not playing well? Which one of them can be offset and play off the catch and shoot? Which is one of the things that I never understood. I don't want to get into this, but I need to comment to get off my chest. It's one of the things I never understood about Jimmer in the NBA. Jimmer was a bona fide give him the ball, get out of the way, let him teach you how to Jimmer, let him cook, and set him 2 or 3 screens, and he is good. And he goes to the NBA where experts try to make him an off the ball JJ Redick type of player. It doesn't make sense. And so, how are you going to ask both of these kids to be off the ball players when none of them are? It is not easy for you to adjust. And so, how do you make it work? I don't know. I'm grateful that I don't have to make the decision, right? Because Kevin Young truly is between a rock and a hard place. The one thing that I will say is, and this is not because I'm super close with Trevin, and you guys all saw how much I worked with him in the summertime, how close we are. Trevin's natural abilities to catch and shoot and create space for himself and others. Trevin should be playing more. Richie is having a renaissance of a season, and Richie to operate, he needs space. And so Trevin coming off the bench, it's a little bit of an awkward feeling in terms of space wise. And so, what do you do? Do you play and start your shiny new once in a lifetime recruit, or do you play your experienced junior who is battle tested and has won games in a Big-12? Talk about between being between a rock and a hard place.
So, JT, with this offense, you kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier where you talked about how there's so many capable guys on this roster. With how this offense has been being played so far this season and with the amount of guys on this team that are talented, how difficult do you think it is for these players to find a rhythm and a flow in these games?
It's not easy. And I mentioned earlier when I said start me off the bench, it took me about 3 4 games of
Mm-hmm.
playing a lot of minutes, not playing minutes, sitting down. It is not easy. Now, I rarely say that I was unique and a special player. But up when I graduated and I finished my career, I was the winningest player. I had a bunch of records that Jimmer broke, and I'm okay with that. He had to go, supernova, like he had to go Goku Super Saiyan to be able to break my records. I'm okay with that. I can live with that. And so, but it wasn't easy because you have a different role, a different perspective, different teammates, different chemistry on the court, different motions, and so as I look into this, how does Mag fit in the rotation? When can you actually give Brody some minutes so he can get his feet wet? What about Mahilo? When can he come off the bench to really make a difference? Well, what about Trey Stewart that he comes in and at the half knocks down a super big time three and then doesn't get played much after that? Well, what about Dallin and Yegor? What about Elijah? And so it's not easy to find your rhythm, and I think the players are feeling that, and the coaching staff is feeling that, right? And I don't think it's because they're not capable. I just think it's one of those situations that sometimes you don't click right away, and sometimes it happens later in the season, unfortunately, and sadly sometimes it doesn't even happen at all. I think we're all over here at the edge of our seat just waiting for it to happen, just waiting for it to happen. I have some ideas, some things that I haven't really seen a ton in the last few games. But again, that comes from a playing experience, not from a coaching experience. How many times have you seen lately BYU go on a 10-0 run, 15-0 run, out of because they're getting easy buckets? It happened once, and that was in the TCU game.
Yep.
When did it happen against Texas Tech? What
There
about
was
even
that
before that?
there was that weird 7-0 run, and then the media timeouts kind of stalled all the rhythm right there. And then,
Yeah.
yeah, but a double-digit run. I mean, we've seen one in the past like 4 weeks, like you mentioned.
And when do those happen? That's something that Travin and I worked a ton on the off season. Make them call a timeout, knock down three or four 3-pointers in a row. But you're not
Mm-hmm.
seeing that because most of the time BYU is giving, and the defense hasn't been totally bad, but BYU gives up a basket instead of like going on a 9-0 run. It always becomes a 7-2, a 6-4. and
Mm-hmm.
and 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 this is not because only of the defense, because you're playing against quality opponents, but the up and run tempo, which Kevin have alluded to as well. So I feel like he is earning all of his bucks right now by having to figure out a way to do this, because it's not an easy situation.
Yeah, for sure. You talking about the chemistry with this team. We Carter and I both have alluded to the fact that we think it's, for lack of a better word, it's off. Especially when you look at the way the offense is flowing. You played a lot of years in college. You played with a lot of great players. How do you improve the chemistry both on and off the court when you're bringing so many guys from so many different worlds and teams together?
So, basketball is the one commonality for all of those guys, right? And I think winning solves everything. Winning can also hide a lot of problems, but you just need to win. And it's also difficult because I look at Brody, right? And I became really close to Brody as well in the off season. Um, Brody went from being the alpha male dog, whatever analogy you want to make. He went from being the alpha at his high school team to barely playing in college. And that is a hard, they talk about the two wolves on your shoulder and which one you're going to feed. That is a hard one to kind of tame, because you're wired and you're brainwashed to give me the ball, get out of the way, I'm going to make it happen. And it is an insane amount of mental gymnastics you have to do, right? And so it's not an easy transition. And all of these guys were special. I mean, like I said, the only one I feel like there is a natural rotation set is Keba and Foose. I think at the end of every game, you're like, maybe Foose could have played a couple of minutes more. Keba should have played a couple of minutes more. But that's it, right? With everybody else is, gosh, I didn't even see him today. Oh wow, what happened? Why didn't he get more playing time? And so it's a difficult situation. And I know we keep talking about the same thing. But that's the most glaring thing right now. With Dawson is, how can he fit, on a chemistry wise, on a vibe wise. And not I'm talking about like, oh, I'm cool, oh, friends off the court. I'm talking about like, how do you blend and mesh with someone on a court? Is Dawson gonna attack? Excuse me. Is Dawson going to attack? Is he going to be a catch and shoot guy? When is he going to penetrate? Well, what about when you play him and Rich? Then you don't have a true catch and shoot guy, and then you're gonna figure out a way to involve Trev, but then you need a creator. Which one is going to be? Is going to be Elijah or Dallin? But what about when you have both of them and Richie's on fire, but you need spacing? Are you going to play Travinet at the four? What about Mahilo? Well, what about Mag? You want to be defensive? I mean, all of these things, the players are thinking it. Kevin is thinking it. Will is thinking it. Tim is thinking it. Brian is thinking. Chris is thinking. It is all on their minds. I can tell from experience, right? It is not easy. And, you could say, well, somebody has to emerge as the leader. I don't see that. I don't see that somebody needs to go and take the reign of the situation. Sometimes it's just tough. And sometimes like I said, sometimes it just doesn't click. We had a lot of high expectations. We talking about a Big-12 championship, like go to the NCAA tournament, make a run, special season. But it maybe takes a year, right? And here's another one that I'm going to throw it to you. What if Yegor is not, and I mean, he's not playing well right now. We have to be honest, right? And I think that's okay. It's okay to recognize that right now, as of today, Yegor is not playing to the best of his abilities, right? And that is just that just happens. But what if Yegor is, it becomes a late second, a late first round, or maybe second round in the draft, and he decides to come back? What do you do then? What do you do of 2 years of Dallin and Yegor playing together? Sure, AJ is gonna be there, and guys, who haven't we even talked about yet? Cannon Catchings. Think about that, and then throw Cannon in all of this equation. That becomes the 13th player we're talking. And so is it a good problem to have? Sure, but it's becoming more of a burden than just a problem now.
So looking forward right now, and this will be the last question before we go to a quick break. Looking forward, they've got a couple easier opponents. Obviously, no game in the Big 12 is a gimme. At home, Oklahoma State, you're a 13.5-point favorite. It is a must not lose, at least in this game. It's a quad 3 game. You can't lose it. And then Saturday at Utah. This Utah team, for lack of a better term, has stunk this season. So you look at those two games. How important are these easier games to hopefully build some confidence, especially a road win against your rival at Utah?
I said this earlier too. Well, last week, there are no must-win games. Every single game is a must-win. And so, but if they win at home, which they should against Oklahoma State, lo and behold, they go up the hill, and it's a rivalry game, and anything can happen. If they don't win that, I think that at that point, that is to me would be when you're like, okay, maybe we need to kind of pump the brakes a little bit, or something is happening. If they don't win that Utah game, because Utah, I mean, it stunk. I mean, you're being too kind. They are absolutely horrible. They're terrible. They have a tight end playing basketball that has no business to play basketball. And I mean, they have all of the. It is just a mess right now at Utah, right? And we all thought that the football team was bad. Good grief, the basketball team makes it even worse some way somehow. And so to me, that will be not a must win on the road. But if they don't beat Utah at Utah, that to me becomes a massive problem. That you're like, hold up, we have to reevaluate certain things here.
If they
JT,
want
what's
to make
your
it to real quick, if they want to make it to March Madness, it's a must win.
So, and that's where I have a time when and not just you, KB. Anybody that says that's a must-win game, dog. Every game is a must-win. Like you need to
Sure,
win. You know
sure,
what I'm
in
saying?
a
Like
certain
at
context,
all.
yeah,
Sure, I get what you're saying, but like,
yeah.
and I like the way you said that. That's a can lose game. Like you know what I'm saying? Like I won't say that's a must. You can lose because I personally feel if they lose to Utah at Utah, that to me you're like, hold up, we need to have a quick timeout, press the PS button, go get a drink of water, reevaluate what's happening. And so that's what I'm looking for. That's what I'm looking forward to most right now.
Yeah, it's almost as if, like, if nothing else, for the record, it just would really crush, I think, the mojo and whatever confidence this team has. JT, what's your best Utah story? What's your best story playing up there, up north?
My best Utah story, my freshman year. And obviously you guys are a little bit young, but we've had a good relationship on social media. You guys study BYU basketball history. When I was probably one of the bigger signs, when I came to BYU at that point, I was the player of the year in Nevada. I led Nevada in points and rebounds. I averaged a double double, and so I felt really disrespected when I wasn't picked to be the preseason freshman of the year, and they had picked this guy from Australia, Stephen Way. And at that point in conference, we hadn't won. We hadn't won at Utah in like 20 years almost since the Randy Reed days, the Roger Reed days. We really needed a win to keep going. It's a rivalry game, and I go up, and I had had a couple of really good games up to that point, so people knew who I was. And I go in, and every time I touched the ball or I did something or score a basket, I stared at Stephen Way. The kid had no idea who I was, but he would probably thought that I was like a sociopath. But I was determined to show him up that I should be the freshman of the year, which I ended up being. But like, yeah, I was on a mission, and I had my first collegiate dunk that game. I came off the bench. I lit up. I had like 17, 19 points. We beat Utah at Utah. Like we smacked them. And in my career, I was 7-2 against Utah, which is not a bad record to have. And I remember just being in the locker room, and Austin Ainge is hyping me up. And I'm like, man, I played at the Pit. I just gave New Mexico the business. I just got done playing Utah. I gave Utah the business. And all the coaches are like, you are an idiot. Stop talking. Like, this is not normal. And Austin is like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Keep going, JT. Thankfully I had a lot of success against those teams. But I'll never forget that Utah story, because like I was vibing. I had my really nice big, Beats by Dre's. I was listening to Put You on a Game by the game. Like I was on one. And so every time I go back to the Huntsman Center, I think about how confident I felt going into that game, and just how poor Stephen Way had no idea who I was. But boy, he was on every dart and bullseye that I had on my dorm at BYU at that point.
I love it. Let's take a quick break, and we'll answer some Twitter questions right after that. Let's answer some Twitter questions, and we'll get out of here. We asked the fans some questions to ask JT today. Let's go to @ShrimpyJacks on Twitter. How do you help build continuity as a player on this BYU roster this year, JT?
There was no substitute to time, to experience, and just being there. You know what I mean? I recently had a conversation. I think it was with Jerome Jordan or Spencer Linton, and to me, the key to BYU doing all of this with Kevin Young, and the whole one and done that he's kind of going after with Yegor and AJ, it's not necessarily just about them, but it's about the LDS players that you bring to BYU. And then the one-offs of Elijah that decide to play at BYU as a four-star recruit, and the Xavions. Those to me are the key. Why? Go back to John Calipari's era at Kentucky, and all of the success he had. Most of his teams, they had a lot of really good freshmen. They had some upperclassmen there. They had some sophomores and juniors playing a massive role there. And so this is where I think BYU can eventually get to, where they're going to get the AJs and the Yegors and the Xavions and the Elijahs and and those guys, and then complement them with the Brodies, with the Chamberlains, with the Dallin Halls, with the Richie Saunders. But to get to that point, you need time. You need experience. Good choice. My credit to my wife. My wife always says this: good choices come from experience. Experience comes from bad choices. And you make bad choices by having turnovers, missing shots, messing up on rotation, which BYU can't really afford right now to put Brody in, because the team is not doing well, and in the pecking order he is down. But that's how you get experience, and to me, that's how you build continuity.
Chase, you have the Twitter pulled up?
I do. Let's go with Jack Carpenter at Jack_Carpenter5. I think so much will be solved once Dallin and Yegor find their groove together, but they're both pretty ball dominant. How would you go about maximizing both of their skill sets?
So, the way that I look at this is that they're at for their position, there is, maybe there's 40 minutes in a game, but maybe for them together there's about 50 minutes in a game because they can spill. So is there a way that you can play Dallin and Yegor, you know 20 minutes together, but then you can play 5 minutes of, maybe 3 4 minutes in the first half of just Yegor, and then 3 4 minutes in the second half of just Dallin. And that to me is where it becomes key. Maybe you can play, there's between both of them is going to be, 80 minutes because they're two positions. But maybe what you do is, out of those 80 minutes, you play half of that with them together, and then you play another, 5 to 10 minutes with each of them handling the rock, but that spills to the rest of the rotation. And that's why I feel like, and this is no disrespect to Dawson, or to Mag, or to Cannon, but something has got to give. And Cannon is not playing well now, and next man up. And then if the next guy start playing well, Cannon might not see the floor. Well, Cannon was almost a borderline 5-star recruit that came from overtime elite, and we barely have talked about him over there in this episode because he hasn't really been a focus of the conversation. And so, how do I focus on that? I'll probably figure out a way for you to play both of them for about 20 minutes, and then the other together, and then the other 20 minutes split their time and just try to make good decisions with the best you can, but it just feels like they have one, they actually have too many guys right now fighting for playing time, which is, it's just a little bit too much.
I think I 100% agree. Jennifer Smith, speaking of Cannon catchings, at JBS5665 said, "What does Cannon need to do to get more minutes?"
Yeah, I think the expectations for Canon were through the roof, right? I think obviously they were not Yegor Demon, expectations, but people really put a lot on Cannon's shoulders, and so at a certain point, I think he just has to be a kid, and he just has to be, and this is where I talk about, um, excuse me, maybe there's just a couple of too many guys on the roster at this point because he can get, I mean, he needs minutes to improve and get better. But right now it's difficult when Dawson and Richie and Trevin are all upper, and Dallin, they're all upperclassmen, and they have more experience, and they, in key moments of the game, they have been there, they've done that, and they can not necessarily take over and impact the game from a physical perspective like Cannon can, right? Or maybe not even from a pure talent because Cannon is really raw and he has, the world ahead of him. But sometimes you have to win a game. At the end of the day, Kevin's job is to win games, and and that's why I mentioned at the beginning. I want to say, I want to make sure that I deliver on this. What is the goal for this year? Is the goal for this year for you to get Yegor to the NBA so that BYU with AJ coming becomes a pipeline to the NBA draft? Or is your goal to win a lot of games, to win championships, to go to the NCAA tournament, and so on? Can both of those be achieved at the same time? Yes, they can, but it doesn't happen overnight. You have to start somewhere, and we have multiple examples of that with Florida, around the time I was a freshman, UCLA, and then you can even look at John Calipari at Kentucky. It does take time because you have to have the right mix of players on the right positions, on the right roles. And so to me, Cannon right now is just, I don't want to say a victim, like that's bad, but he's just a byproduct of a tough season and not playing well, and just not everybody is really playing well right now, and somebody needs to step up and make plays, and the older guys know how to, those little nooks and cranny to just make something happen. You get that from experience, which Canada's having a hard time getting right now.
Mm-hmm.
Wise words. Our last Twitter comments from Jackson at Arizona Coug 1. Would BYU be better if everyone just shaved their heads?
It worked for me. Right now, now I work in tech and I'm running companies, and I got the side part, the nice fade. I go to the barber every other week. But one time I was a broke college student without NIL money, and I mean, you guys remember I had a shiny dome. And I would just hop in, and everybody always said, "Why were you doing that?" And I'm like, "Well, because at BYU you have to be clean shaven." And it took me 5 minutes to just get my razor and just go every air and just go like this, rather than just try to get a fade and this and that and all of that. And so, I it was a recipe for success, and it worked for me. And I recommend everybody to just go bald. A lot of people always thought I used Rogaine, and they're like, "Do you use Bosley? Did you use Rogaine? How did you gain hair?" And I'm like, I always had hair. I was a broke college student that had no money. So
Let me ask you this: if you were playing in the NIL era, let's say a school offers you $500,000 to come play for a year, what is the first purchase you're making as a college student with $500,000?
is this 2024, Jonathan, or is this like
No, this
late
is
2000,
2000. Yeah,
Jonathan?
this is mid 2000s. Yeah.
I would have been so stupid, and I would have gotten like, like my first few years as a rookie overseas, I made a lot of stupid purchases. I had a lot of designer stuff. And so, but I'll tell you this, I would have made like the stupidest decision. I probably would have bought a Rolls Royce. Like I would have gone out and gotten like, a buck 50. Like I would have dropped, a few bands on a Rolls Royce Phantom. This is back in the day, guys, when like, Rolls Royces were like 150, 175, 200. So you're giving me half a mil,
Yep.
and I mean, forget taxes. I'm gonna drop it black on black with 24s, just like a Mike Jones. And I would have done something extremely stupid like that. So that's easily what I would have done.
Chase, do you have anything else?
Other than that, would have been awesome. Just JT out there in Provo with
And
a
I don't know.
Rolls Royce.
And I don't know if I mean, obviously you guys are young, but my car. I have a license plate. I have a JT 45 on my license plate.
Yeah,
I
the
don't know if you guys.
Porsche. You see it around.
Yeah. And so I have a JT 45 license plate, and I also had in college, right? And so, which is pretty cool. I mean, in Utah, people know who I am, which is pretty awesome. And I get to talk to a lot of people. But I would have like that JT 45. I had a Blazer, a Chevy Blazer in college, and that JT 45 was nice, but a JT 45 on a Phantom with 24s and black rims, that would have hit different, fellas. So,
There is a 1000% chance you would have had a JT 45 chain, right? That you would
oh,
walk into games with.
yeah. I mean, just like, or just like, so in high school, I'm gonna tell you guys this. When we had MySpace, right? And I know you guys know what MySpace is, but you probably missed it, all the generation. My MySpace page, you could customize it and play a song with it and all of that. My page was all white, crispy white, and I had dollar signs falling and trickling down the page with Tupac's Ambitions as a Rider playing. And so as soon as you go and said, "I won't deny ya, I'm a straight rider. You don't want to." And it just dollar signs trickling, and my name was like JT Money. There is 1,000% chance, Carter, that I would have a JT 45 chain driving my Rolls Royce Phantom in Provo, and I would probably be in jail for not paying taxes. And yeah, oh yeah, that's right.
One last question I had was name the show's obviously church ball. Give us your funniest or best church ball story. Playing in a pickup gym, whether it was your time in Provo or after or before.
Yeah. So in the '90s, that was a wide receiver that played at BYU, Eric Drage, and he was legit. He was the truth. Arguably as one of the top wide receivers from BYU, and he was really really good. In the summertime, I was playing at a church ball, and for a few weeks, and I was just there because I needed to get a run in. Sometimes, I just didn't want to hop on a treadmill. I was tired of it. I was just gonna go find a gym and just play. I would be like hoodie mellow and just drenched in sweat, just running up and down. Well, this guy kept like bumping me and cutting me off, and I never try to show off. You ask anybody, I never try to make a point on unless I was playing with other pros or with the BYU college guys, I never made a point to stand out. I would run really hard. I would get rebounds. I'd go on fast break. I would pass to everybody. Like, I never wanted to be that guy. But this dude kept cutting me and just kept cutting me off and then one time he came and then I kind of just, I did a move to get him out of the way and he fell for it. And then he came and like, almost came to like undercut me. And at that point, it had been a few times I lost it. And Eric Drage was playing with me and I lost it. I turned around, I threw the ball at the guy. I took my hoodie off. I went after him and I just start clocking him. And the guy's like this, and I'm just going at it, and I'm going at a church building, and I'm going at it. And then about Charlie Peterson, the BYU quarterback, was there too. He can vouch to this. Charlie Peterson and Eric Drage, and they grabbed me, and I'm tossing them like I'm trying to like just destroy this guy because my body's my livelihood. I'm still playing in Europe. If I get hurt, my family doesn't eat. And it was the craziest story. And Eric was like, JT, get out of here, get out of here. Charlie gets my stuff, carry me to the car. I get in the car and like I saw red for like an hour. I don't remember getting home. I just remember being on my couch and getting a phone call from Eric. Hey, are you okay? What's happening? And I never saw the guy again. He never showed up to play. But that is the wildest, church balls. Like it was a good thing that Eric stopped me, or I would have been in trouble because I was going after that guy badly. So
that's amazing. That's a great way to close off the show, Chase.
The great way. It sounds like a typical church ball outing. I mean, it's not church ball unless there's a few punches thrown, right?
and now and you guys have seen clips of me playing, and you follow me on Twitter, and it checks out, right? I mean, it's my wife always says, Jonathan lived his life, a catch and shoot 3-pointer at a time. No disregard if I'm open or not, without conscience, just catch and shoot and deal with the consequences later. So
I love it. That'll do it from us. Make sure to follow JT on Twitter at 43JT. Thank you so much for coming on, man.
hey man, I appreciate you guys. I think you guys do great work. Keep it up. I would love to be a guest here again. And